Have you ever tried so hard to make things work and still failed? Maybe you've poured your heart into a dream only to watch it crumble. Maybe you've woken up every morning with hope only to go to bed feeling empty again. You keep trying, you adjust, you push harder, but nothing changes. And slowly, quietly, you start wondering, is this just how my life is supposed to be? Here's what you need to know. Failure isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of something far greater than you imagined. This is the story of a man who failed not once, not twice, but 7 times. And then everything changed. It's not your fault. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not just unlucky. What you're feeling, the exhaustion, the doubt, the quiet shame, is real, and you are not alone. Millions of people wake up every day carrying that same weight. They show up, they try, they fall short, again and again. But what if I told you that your repeated failures aren't proof you'll never succeed, but proof you're getting closer? This story begins in a small town near Lyon, France, in a tiny apartment above a shuttered bookstore. His name was Antoine. He was 34 years old, a former line cook, now unemployed. He'd started 7 small businesses over 5 years, each one collapsing before it could breathe. A food truck, a meal prep service, a spice blend subscription, all gone. He believed he had nothing left to give. No savings, no support, just debt and a growing sense that maybe he wasn't meant for more. But one rainy Tuesday, while walking past an abandoned bakery, he saw something that stopped him cold. Not a sign, not a miracle, just a loaf of bread left on the windowsill by someone unknown. He picked it up, took a bite, and for the first time in months, he felt something stir inside. Little did Antoine know that single loaf would become the seed of his 8th and final attempt. Antoine lived in a one-room flat with peeling wallpaper and a fridge that hummed louder than his thoughts. His bank account held 83 euros. His phone buzzed only with overdue notices. Every morning he stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes before forcing himself up, not because he had purpose, but because staying in bed felt like surrender. He'd once dreamed of opening his own boulangerie, a place where bread wasn't just food, but comfort. But after his 7th business folded, a sourdough delivery startup, he stopped dreaming altogether. "I'm cursed," he whispered one night, sitting on the floor with unpaid bills spread around him. Maybe some people just aren't built to win. He'd tried everything right, followed online courses, networked, hustled 16-hour days, yet each venture collapsed under costs, competition, or his own crushing self-doubt. Worse than the money was the silence. Friends stopped asking how he was. Family offered pitying looks. Even his reflection seemed disappointed. Every day felt the same. Wake up, scroll job listings, feel unworthy, eat stale bread, sleep, repeat. He'd walk past bakeries and feel a sharp ache, not hunger, but grief. Grief for the man he thought he'd become, the one who created, who fed people, who mattered. One evening, after another rejection email, "We've chosen other candidates," he sat on his fire escape, watching rain soak the cobblestones below. He held a half-eaten baguette, bought with his last coins, and whispered, "What's the point of trying again when I always fail?" That night, he almost threw away his apron, the only thing he hadn't sold. But something made him hang it back on the hook. Just then, his neighbor, an elderly woman named Madame Lefebvre, knocked. She held out a small jar. "My grandmother's starter," she said. "It's strong, like you used to be." He didn't answer, but he took it. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. That jar would become his lifeline. Antoine didn't believe in magic, but as he fed Madame Lefebvre's sourdough starter, naming it Clémence after her grandmother, something shifted. Not overnight,
Not dramatically, but slowly, consistently, Clemence grew stronger, bubbly, alive. One morning, while kneading dough for the third time that week, a thought struck him. What if success isn't about scale, but consistency? He remembered reading somewhere that great bakers don't chase trends, they master one thing, perfectly, over and over. So he asked himself, what if I stopped trying to build a business and just bake one perfect loaf? Not for investors, not for Instagram, just for truth, for craft, for the quiet joy of making something real. That became his new rule, one loaf every day, no matter what. He studied fermentation, water temperature, rest times. He learned that sourdough isn't rushed, it's listened to, like a person, like a relationship. At first, he scoffed at the idea. How will one loaf feed me, pay rent, fix my life? But then he remembered his lowest moment, eating that random loaf on the windowsill. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't branded, but it tasted honest. And that honesty had reached him when nothing else could. So he committed. No grand plan, no funding, just flour, water, salt, and Clemence. Day 1, dense brick, inedible. Day 2, better rise but bland. Day 3, burnt crust. Day 4, forgot to feed Clemence, starter nearly died. He almost quit again. But on day 5, something changed. The dough felt different in his hands, elastic, alive, responsive. He shaped it gently, scored it with care, slid it into his tiny oven. When it came out, golden, blistered, fragrant, he broke off a piece and closed his eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. And for the first time in years, he felt proud. He realized something profound. Success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about showing up, even after failing 7 times, and choosing to try differently. Not bigger, not faster, but deeper. With presence, with patience, with respect for the process. This wasn't just baking, it was healing. And Antoine, finally, began to heal too. Day 6, he baked 2 loaves, one for himself, one for Madame Lefebvre. She cried when she tasted it. Just like my childhood, she said. Day 10, he gave a loaf to the grocer down the street. The man asked for 3 more the next week, paid in cash. Day 15, disaster. He misjudged the hydration. The dough turned to soup. He stared at the mess, tears mixing with flour on his cheeks. This is pointless, he muttered. I'm still broke, still invisible. He almost threw away Clemence. But then he remembered Madame Lefebvre's words. Good bread takes time, so do good lives. So he cleaned up, fed the starter, started again. Day 22, a local cafe owner tasted his bread during a chance visit. You sell these? He asked. No, I just bake. Well, I'll take 6 every Friday. First income in months, 30 euros. Small, but real. Day 30, he upgraded his oven, bought better flour. Still sleeping on a mattress on the floor, but now with purpose. Day 37, doubt returned. A rival bakery opened nearby, flashy, modern, backed by investors. Antoine watched customers flock there. His sales dropped. Some days he wondered, am I just delaying the inevitable? But he kept baking, 1 loaf every day. Day 47, a food blogger stumbled upon his bread at the cafe. She posted a poem with the caption, Hidden Gem, tastes like memory. Overnight, messages poured in. Where can I buy this? He had no website, no shop, just his kitchen. So he said yes to 10 orders, hand-delivered. Day 58, he ran out of bowls, used pots, then buckets. His tiny kitchen became a command center of rising dough and hope. Day 63, his landlord threatened eviction, complained about commercial activity. Antoine panicked, begged for time, offered free bread. The landlord tried it and lowered his rent instead. Day 70, he hired his first helper, a teenage neighbor who needed work. paid him in bread and lessons. Day 78, a local newspaper wrote a feature, "The Baker Who Failed 7 Times, Now Feeding a Town." Suddenly, people came not just for bread, but for the story. But here's what no one saw. The nights he cried from exhaustion, the mornings he woke up terrified he couldn't deliver, the voice inside whispering, "You're a fraud, they'll find out."
Yet every single day he showed up. Because now it wasn't just about him. It was about the elderly couple who said his bread reminded them of their wedding day. The young mother who saved coins all week just to buy one loaf for her son. The recovering addict who said, "Your bread tastes like second chances." On day 89, he received an email from a famous Parisian chef. It read, "I tasted your sourdough. I want to feature it in my restaurant." Antoine didn't celebrate. He fed Clémence, kneaded dough, baked. Because by then, he understood. The victory wasn't in the offer. It was in the daily choice to keep going, especially when no one was watching. After 90 days of one loaf a day, everything shifted. Not with fireworks, not with a viral video, but with quiet certainty. The Paris chef's endorsement brought orders from across France, then Belgium, then Japan. Antoine didn't scale recklessly. He said no to investors, no to mass production. Instead, he rented a small storefront, just big enough for 4 tables and an oven. He called it 7 échecs, 7 failures. On opening day, he baked 50 loaves, sold out by 9 a.m. Within 3 months, he employed 5 people. Within 6, he paid off all his debt. But the real breakthrough wasn't financial. It was the morning he looked in the mirror and didn't see a failure. He saw a man who kept going. Customers told him his bread tasted like home, not because of the recipe, but because it carried his journey. One woman hugged him and said, "You gave me hope just by existing." His parents visited. For the first time in years, his father held his shoulders and said, "I always knew you'd find your way." Even his old doubters came, quietly, to buy bread. By attempt number 8, he hadn't just built a business, he'd rebuilt himself, and the world noticed. A documentary crew filmed him for a series on quiet resilience, not because he shouted his success, but because he embodied it. One evening, as he closed the shop, he found a note tucked under the door. "I failed 6 times. Your story made me try a 7th. Thank you." He pinned it to the wall beside his apron. It was like the fog lifted. All those years of shame replaced by purpose. He finally understood. His failures weren't stains on his record. They were the foundation of his wisdom. And that single loaf on the windowsill wasn't random. It was a message from the universe, from kindness, from possibility, that sometimes the smallest thing can reignite a soul. Today, Antoine runs a modest but thriving bakery with locations in 3 cities. He employs 22 people, many of them former failures like him. His sourdough is served in Michelin-starred restaurants, but he still bakes the first loaf every morning himself. He lives in a sunlit apartment now, with plants, books, and a quiet peace, no longer haunted by the past, but grateful for it. Looking back, he says, "Those 7 failures taught me more than any success ever could. They taught me humility, patience, the value of showing up even when you're scared." His life isn't perfect. Some days are hard, some batches fail, but now failure doesn't define him, it refines him. And the ripple effects? Madame Lefebvre visits every Sunday. His teenage helper is now studying culinary arts. The cafe owner who gave him his first break now sources all his bread from 7 échecs. Most importantly, Antoine helps others who feel stuck. He offers free workshops, how to rise after falling. He doesn't promise riches, he promises this: if you commit to one true thing and do it with honesty, the world will respond.
Not loudly, not instantly, but surely. His transformation wasn't magical. It was methodical, daily, human, and that's what makes it possible for you too. Now, here's what this means for you. You don't need a grand plan. You don't need funding, fame, or permission. You just need one thing, your loaf, to commit to. One skill, one habit, one act of courage, done consistently. Starting tomorrow, you can choose it. Not 10 things, not a whole new life, just one. Maybe it's writing one page, calling one client, walking for 20 minutes, asking for help. Do it even if you failed before, especially if you failed before. Because your past attempts aren't proof you can't succeed. They're proof you're willing to try, and that willingness is your greatest asset. Your failures aren't the end. They're preparation. They're teaching you what doesn't work so you can discover what does. Choose your loaf. Feed it daily. Protect it. Honor it. And trust this. The world needs what only you can create, not perfectly, but authentically. Every day you wait is a day lost, but also a day you can reclaim, starting now. Your story isn't over. This is just the beginning. Stay for more stories that might change your perspective, because sometimes all it takes is one loaf to remember who you are. Keep rising.